Hello there and welcome to another episode of the Long Live Rock and Roll podcast. I think he's normally on my left, but today he's on my right. This is Mr. Felipe Amarin, my co-host.
Hello everyone, how you guys doing?
It's all good. We're here, we're in Felipe's place. If you can hear any music and crowds behind us, it's because we're in the hustle and bustle of Soho. We are literally living a 60s London musician's dream. This is this guy's flat. He lives above the venue he plays in 3 times a week. So he's got the shortest commute in the world?
Yeah, I've actually redefined the concept of a house drummer. I'm literally the house drummer. I go downstairs and play. You know when they say there's a house band and the house drummer is the guy from that band? I'm the house drummer because I live at the venue.
You're the house drummer of the whole venue.
Of the whole venue,
you
yeah,
can't
exactly.
ever be replaced. Yeah.
Exactly.
Excellent.
And for those who like Oasis, this building is in the cover of What's the Story, Morning Glory.
It is. You can see his window from the front cover.
You can see me waving at the window. No, I wasn't there.
You got a time machine, yeah. Ben, if you can see, if you're watching on YouTube, we blocked it out for light purposes, but the window behind it looks out onto where the front cover was shot. So, really cool stuff. And yeah, we've done the volume test. You know, our voices are loud enough, but we thought we'd keep the window open. A, because it's hot, and B, because you just can't beat a crowded Soho, couldn't you?
No,
it's where everyone wants to be on a Saturday.
We might hear anything from drunk people to Hare Krishna singing.
Or a car horn.
Or a car horn.
Excellent.
Love it.
Anyway, well, today we are back and we are doing, we are focusing on a band today, and that band is called The Band. Felipe, you were the one who suggested we do this band.
Which band?
The Band.
Which band?
A band, any band?
The band. Yeah. So I suggested the band. Actually, let me get the show started properly.
As usual.
Today's show is sponsored by Stronghold.
As usual, here's my water. Cheers, brother.
Cheers.
Let the show begin.
Why the band? I was actually introduced to the band by you, Lars. Actually, I knew them. I knew of them. You know, first thing I actually saw of the band was they were playing with Roger Waters at the Berlin concert, The Wall 1990. And for me, it was just one more band in the event. I've heard of them. Oh yeah, they used to play with Bob Dylan, and that was it.
Yeah.
The only thing I knew about the band, they're a good band. They do vocal harmonies, and they used to be Bob Dylan's backing band. Well, that's enough information.
Yeah,
that's enough for you to kind of think, to consider how good those guys are. But then you started talking about how they mixed so many like early rock and roll influences and jazz and country and I was like, really? I mean, I never heard their albums, you know.
Yeah.
So I started listening to music from Big Pink and the band, which I have in vinyl.
Do you?
Yeah, it's downstairs.
Isn't it just great?
Christmas.
But we'll get there in the timeline.
Yeah.
First of all, I want to tell the story because I have a person to thank for introducing me to the band, and that's my stepbrother Tarek, who you've met plenty of times. And I just got to set the scene because this was one of the, you know, you have those moments in your life, and I feel like they probably mean a bit more to us as musicians because we've been exposed to so much music that when something special hits, it's like, wow, okay, I've spent the last 2 years learning songs by 100 different artists, but this is what's hit me hardest. It was June, so it was in the summer. I was at my brother Tarek's to watch a UFC event. And for those who watch or know UFC, it's mainly in America. So we're often on the special nights, we're staying up till 7 in the morning. The last fight always finishes at 6:30. Now there was 2 more fights left of this particular card. It must have been about 4 o'clock in the morning, and we were out of chicken wings, which is a disaster. So
I'm just trying to wonder how this relates to the band. How are we going to get there?
So we sat there and we said, what are we going to do? Like, we can't. There's 2 more fights. Like, we can't just not have anything to eat. And Tarek said, there's a shop up the road. It's 24 hours. We'll go there quickly before the next fight. Now the next fight was 2 American fighters. One guy from California and another guy who is from, I'm not going to say he's from Arkansas, where some of the band are from, but he was from the deep south of America, where you can hear the band's music come from. And I don't know if he purposely did it, but on the drive there, because we were preparing for this all-American fight, Tarek put on the band. and he put on The Night They Drove Old Dixie Down. As usual, guys, this will all be in the playlist in the show notes. He put on The Night They Drove Old Dixie Down and King Harvest. And I was just sat there listening and marvelling at this music and this raw Americana music. Bearing in mind I'm preparing to watch two Americans fight, and we're going to get some American-style chicken wings through Boreham Wood. The sun was rising, and if you play that song, next time you see a sunset or the sun rises and you're up before the sunrise, play The Night They Drove Old Dixie Down and just tell me that you don't want to be American after listening to that.
For a minute,
yeah. So anyway, so I heard that, we went back, watched the fights, it was amazing, and then the next day on my drive home I played The Band album, which is also known as the Brown album, and I sort of fell in love. I spent a month listening to that album. They were one of those bands where I didn't want the amazing experience to be ruined by a rubbish album, so I didn't branch out. But then we went on tour to Brazil, and on the flight over, I said, Jack, we were playing Jack Hutchinson. I said, do you know the band? And he goes, oh my God, what have you listened to? And I said, the Brown album. He said, right, music from Big Pink and The Last Waltz. Thank me later. And my whole tour of Brazil, when we were on the coach trips going from city to city,
I was too busy doing the business.
He was organising the gigs. Jack had his own music. I was listening to everything the band had done, and from that moment, actually even from the moment Tarek played them in the car, they've become one of my top 10 bands, I reckon, just because I love their music.
I think you described really well the kind of feelings they bring to people, and that's why they're so good, because they're very, very imagetic, if I can put it like that. So you listen to a song and you start picturing something in your head, like it takes you to the places, where they probably wrote the songs, whatever. It makes you think about a lifestyle or a location or something. It's really cool, and they're also great musicians, which is I think the band's one of those bands that once you find how good they are, you're like, how the fuck I missed this for my whole life.
I see, yeah. Well, actually, I mean, I think we'll maybe get to it later, but there have been openly, Eric Clapton has cut. So there is about the Brown album. Don't worry, we will do a whole episode on the Brown album because it deserves it. But there is a classic albums episode where they focus on that album, and they interview George Harrison, Eric Clapton, and Eric Clapton comes out and says, "Yeah, no, I was desperate to be in the band." So I really wanted to be in the band, and I was always trying to get myself going to the sessions or trying to get myself an invitation. But he said they're a tight-knit group of guys,
Well, when you think about the fact that most people want to be in Eric Clapton's band, wanted to be with the band. The band.
Excellent. Right, so we'll start off. I'll tell you who's in the band. Now, I wrote down the names and the instruments they play, but all of them play so many different things that I'm just going to tell you what they mainly do, right? So we've got Levon Helm on drums, mandolin and vocals, Richard Manuel on piano and vocals, Rick Danko on bass and vocals, Robbie Robertson on guitar, and we'll call them backing vocals, and Garth Hudson on organ, accordion, keyboard, second piano, whatever. That's the band. Now, you are particularly taken by Levon Helm and Robbie Robertson. Did you want to talk about them?
Yes, the reason why I want to talk about them is like Robbie Robertson. It's interesting because he was the only one in the band who wasn't a singer. Let's put it like that. He couldn't sing backing vocals, this and that. But there are some claims that some of the live recordings, his vocals were appalling.
Yeah.
I don't know if you heard that. I hope it's a lie. I like him. But basically, he never claimed to be a singer anyway. But he was the main songwriter, wasn't he? That is interesting. When they split up, he was still making loads of money without performing because he wrote most of the songs. So you have this guy who is not the voice of the band, maybe not even the image of the band at that point, and he is the main songwriter. Yeah. So you actually had, that's really interesting. You have so many good instrumentalists in the band, but you still have a leader. Which you would expect the band to be like, okay, everyone is really good, so everyone is going to write together or whatever. No, everyone will do the arrangements together. Everyone will work on their part and work together on how to make the groove sound tight enough.
But the idea comes from
one mind most of the time. And Levon Helm is such a unique character in music, because how many drummers you know who are lead singers, right? You can name Phil Collins, you can name see, I can't even think of too many of them,
and he's a drummer.
Yeah, exactly. Because you think about Roger Taylor, who's a fantastic singer, but not the lead singer.
Yeah.
And obviously,
he had
in
a
the band,
few
everyone,
songs, but he wasn't the lead singer, was he?
Exactly. In the band, everyone was taking the lead at some point, but some of the classics, were recorded with Levon Helm on vocals, and his groove is so perfect, and his vocals are spot on. And it's really rare. I think he used to be a guitar player before as well, but never with the band, just playing drums and percussion and singing.
Well, we'll start off in the early years telling you sort of how the band came together. They met and they became a rock and roll band playing covers every night called The Hawks. And they developed, there was a few other people in the band before it became these five
Ronnie
guys.
Hawkins and the Hawks. Because there was a guy called
Yeah,
Ronnie Hawkins.
but were they the Hawks before Ronnie? Or
No,
after?
I think because
of Hawkins.
And they were...
I think you're right. So
Ronnie
Levon
Hawkins
Helm
and the
put
Hawks.
together this band that could go and play anything rock and roll-y that was sort of going about in the 50s. And we are talking late 50s, 58. That band was then hired by Ronnie Hawkins, who was a rock and roll rockabilly singer, to back him. That's where the band came together. The five guys were the backing band for Ronnie Hawkins, and it became Ronnie Hawkins and the Hawks. Now, after a few years, and we're talking about 5 years now of incessant touring, there is a quote from Ronnie Hawkins where he said, the reason that the band became the band is because Levon and Ronnie had made them such a tight unit, they became such a fantastic band that they just didn't want to keep doing covers for the rest of their lives. So then they said, that's when they broke off from Ronnie Hawkins and said, we want to write our own music. But when Ronnie Hawkins was talking about it, and when the band was saying we want to go and do our own stuff, Ronnie said, listen guys, I already told you, and he says this on the last Waltz documentary, he says something along the lines of, the pay's not great, but you're going to get more pussy than Sinatra. And that paints the picture of South USA at that time, doesn't it?
And it's funny because I never thought, when I first heard of the band, I never thought of them as the classic rock and rollers would go about having sex with everyone and taking drugs and all that stuff. But they were.
They were proper
really,
rock and roll.
I mean it's maybe because the kind of music they play, we tend to think as softer as if compared to the other stuff we listen to.
Yeah.
And it's like they were living the rock and roll lifestyle to the
touring,
limit,
exactly.
which didn't prove to be really good in the long run. Did it?
No. Well, like I said, they broke off from Ronnie Hawkins, and Robbie Robertson said about that break off, Ronnie shot himself in the foot really by sharpening us into such a crackerjack band that we had to go on out into the world. So they knew their potential. They knew what they had to offer the world of original music.
They knew they couldn't just be someone's backing band. That's interesting. The interesting thing about that is, as far as I understand, Ronnie Hawkins was feeling like he didn't belong to the thing. It was his band, but it was such a tight unit. It was like, this is not my band. They are a band, and I'm the odd guy here. I shouldn't be.
You're right. The thing that everyone talks about with the band is the camaraderie. So for anyone who doesn't know what that word means, because I had to look it up yesterday, it means
come on.
Yeah, it means brotherhood, isn't it? Like a sense of brother.
Camaraderie. You didn't know that.
No, I didn't. I've used it. But
get your English together, mate.
I didn't know the official definition. Put it that way. Sorry. Can I just say I'm wrong? It was Canada they were playing and touring.
Right.
So now that I've read my notes, I know what happened. Levon was American.
Yes.
The others were Canadian. He went up.
Yeah.
He went up. Joined them, toured with them. Ronnie was Canadian as well, I think. Then after they broke off and became, well, actually they didn't become the band yet. They moved down to New York.
They kept playing as the Hawks, isn't it?
They did.
Without Ronnie.
Actually, they became the Levon Helm Sextet because it was the band plus another guy. And then they became Levon and the Hawks, and they were actually due to be Sonny Boy Williamson's backing band. But he died. A month after agreeing this and getting things in place, he died. Can you imagine?
And he was one of their heroes, isn't it? They were like,
well.
we're going to record him, and then it didn't happen. But that just proves how much people wanted to work with them. Everyone wanted them as a band.
Exactly.
Which justifies the name.
The band. So, because of that, and in keeping with what you're saying, they were moved from Canada to New York by Bob Dylan's manager. If I'm not mistaken, Bob Dylan or his manager was in Canada looking for a backing band for Bob Dylan, and someone who knew the band, a friend of the band, said, "You got to check these guys out." And they said, "Go and check out Levon and the Hawks." And so Bob Dylan's manager went and checked them out, and he wanted them, and Dylan wanted them, and he moved them down to New York in 1965. And that's when they started their work with Bob Dylan. So
and that actually changed their careers like forever.
And
the other playing with one of the biggest artists.
And the other thing is that it changed Bob Dylan's career as well. That's what's not spoken about in his career.
Yeah, they're pretty much responsible for the electric sound of Bob Dylan, isn't it?
Exactly.
So it wasn't. One thing I have to say about that is like it wasn't a very straightforward partnership, like easygoing kind of stuff. Like, oh, we're now playing with Bob Dylan. We're sorted. Everything's going to be great. At first, they didn't feel very comfortable because they were used to play rock and roll, rockabilly, country, whatever.
Yeah.
They used to play what we could call dance music, right? Because they were playing stuff that they knew it would please the audiences and people would dance to, and they knew they could play it really well.
Yeah.
So the band was like, okay, we're gonna play all night, people are gonna dance all night, that's it, we are successful. When they started playing for Bob Dylan, they got into his career in the middle of that big change.
Yeah.
When Bob Dylan was actually defining the whole the whole folk music scene by just saying, "No, I'm going to go electric now."
Yeah.
And the band is here with me, and they were like, "Okay, we just got caught in the middle of the crossfire now," because you were not expecting to be in that position. You're like, you're playing dance music, entertaining people. It's all easy going. So for you, it's your comfort zone, and then you are with a really, really clever, well-known artist who wants you to be part of a big change. And they were like, "Can we do this?"
Yeah.
It's like it
wasn't
that simple for them. They were like, it was a really
tough decision. Yeah. That is when they became Bob Dylan and the band. So that's when the phrase "the band" was first coined in terms of this, or in this respect. As Felipe mentioned and alluded to, what was so important about this relationship was that, now I don't want to say the band are responsible for this, because I'm not sure, to be honest, but in '65 was Bob Dylan's first electric songwriting, let's say. He started using electric instruments, and for many of those who know Bob Dylan, you know that primarily he started out as a folk artist using mainly an acoustic guitar. You've all heard songs like "Blowing in the Wind," "Mr. Tambourine Man." That's what Bob Dylan's famous for, isn't it? The acoustic guitar and his folky songs and folky lyrics. Then the band came along, and he did this first electric tour with them. And there was one night, Manchester, England, where he was booed. And someone shouted at him, "Judas." And he said something like, I don't want to quote it wrong, but something like, "Oh, go away," something like that. But it actually had a really negative effect, especially on Levon Helm, because he could not take being booed every night by audiences for trying new things. And like you said, you've got to remember, he was used to making people happy 2 or 3 times a night, playing 2-3 different sets in different bars, giving the people what they want, music to dance to. So when they come and they join an original project, which is successful because it's Bob Dylan, but the feedback to this new material isn't good.
Bob Dylan was trying a step into a direction that no one has ever been to. So you could be part of Bob Dylan's downfall,
right? Yeah.
You don't want to join, and imagine the guy's been successful forever. When you become a musician in his band,
you're part of it, goes to shit.
That's it. It's like, is that the kind of reputation you want to build?
So Levon actually left to work on an oil rig in New Mexico. In the Gulf of Mexico. Because he just couldn't take it, he just wanted a normal job. But anyway, things kind of sorted themselves out. Levon came back after Bob Dylan had a motorcycle accident, because they went back to playing covers and sort of other gigs and working for other artists. After Dylan's motorcycle accident, he took a break. They became the Hawks again and did some other shows, and then he invited them down to Woodstock, or up to Woodstock, depending where they were living. And that was where they first met, or first came to the Big Pink. Now the Big Pink is a house in.
Yeah, I wonder what is the Big Pink. I don't know.
The Big Pink is a house in New York, and it is just a pink house. That's all it is.
Music from Big Pink.
Now what they did there is they recorded there, and there's a basement downstairs where they recorded loads of demos with Bob Dylan and amongst themselves as well. And Bob Dylan fans, you might know there is an album called The Basement Tapes. I think it came out in 1975, but those recordings were from the mid-60s. And this is Bob Dylan and the band jamming and writing demos at the Big Pink. Or at Big Pink, yeah. I've made the mistake of calling the album Music from the Big Pink. No, but it's music from Big Pink. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, after that, they sort of looked at changing their name and getting back into the original stuff. They liked the Honkies or the Crackers, but those both have kind of Honkies is a mildly racist way to call white people, and Crackers is as well.
Oh,
so the record label vetoed it and said no.
So that's not a good reason, yeah.
And since they were known as the band behind Dylan, they just went with the band really. And so from 1968, the band became a band.
Really clever name. The only thing I believe is wrong about that is, and you know my opinion on this, they missed the trick. They should have released a song called The Song in an album.
On an album called The Album.
The Album. That's, you know, imagine being able to say, oh, have you heard the song?
Which song?
From the album by the band.
Which album?
Yeah,
the album. By what band?
By the band.
What band?
The song from the album by the band. We can't say that because they were not clever enough to do that.
They were just on too many drugs. Yeah. But anyway, like we said, that is the inception of the band. Now there are going to be two main albums we talk about with the band because there are two albums that sort of projected them into music stardom, if you like. And the first one was released in July the 1st, 1968, and that is, as we've alluded to, Music from Big Pink. So do you want to take us away? Tell us your thoughts?
Well, thing is, it's definitely the album that defines them as a band, isn't it? Because what you can hear in the whole album, regardless of which song we're talking about, is how they make the instruments work for the melody, which you gotta consider that they used to do that for someone else. It's a really hard job. So you have a singer-songwriter who's not part of your band. He's the guy hiring you to do a job. So you gotta work as hard as possible, as hard as you can, to make sure you're gonna enhance his music. It's not your music. You're working for someone else's music. You want to make the melody sound better. You want to make the lyrics touch the listener. So the instruments are serving the melody and the lyrics. So they knew how to do that better than anyone else.
Yeah.
So why not doing that for your own songs?
Exactly.
You know what I mean? And they actually recorded a Bob Dylan song there.
Well, there's 3 tracks co-written by Bob Dylan on there. There's track 1, Tears of Rage. Track, it's near the end of the album, called Wheels on Fire, and the final track of the album, which is called I Shall Be Released.
Which is an epic.
Oh, it's just gorgeous, isn't it?
It was I think the second song I've heard from them. I've heard The Weight first.
Oh yeah,
and then this one. So
The Weight as well. We should just actually. The only thing I want to say quickly is Richard Manuel is probably in the country and Americana world, and in the broader muso world. For those who don't know, muso, how would you define the word muso? Like
it's like clever instrumentation kind of stuff.
So you say you're a muso, it's like you know a lot about music, you can probably play a few instruments, you're probably quite versed in music history.
An intellectual musician.
Yeah, I suppose so. So for the musos amongst our listeners, whoever, Richard Manuel is probably one of the most underrated rock and roll singers in rock and roll. And I just wanted to, the reason I'm bringing this up now is because Tears of Rage, track 1, and I Shall Be Released, final track of that album, they're both sung by him, yet his voice is just so different on both of them. He has just such a different timbre and tone that you can't tell that the guy singing track 1 and I Shall Be Released are the same guy.
They're really like high pitched, like
falsetto almost,
but and also it's just so smooth.
Yeah. For
something that is, like, it just delivers the message.
Yeah.
Really. They were famous for playing Bob Dylan stuff better than Bob Dylan himself. that is, you know.
Well, I should be released as an example of that. I think that's just a fantastic song, isn't it?
Oh yeah, if you don't have time to listen to the band, listen to that song.
Yeah, I'm just
There's
gonna.
no way you're not gonna like it. You know.
Oh no, exactly.
Such a beautiful.
The song that actually elevated them was "The Weight," which you already alluded to, and that's because it was used in the movie Easy Rider. When did that come out? Was that 1975? They gained a bit more success and fame through that because that song did really well because the movie did well.
And the vocal harmonies are just brilliant.
That
is a proper, vocal arrangement, and they thought it through, isn't it? It's not like let's just sing some stuff in here.
Exactly.
It's really, really well done, and it's a beautiful constructed structure as well. That's the thing. I think they're good storytellers, just like Dylan was.
Yes, absolutely.
They tell the story, they're guiding you, they're leading you through the story. They manage to keep your attention. I think listening to the band's music is just like watching a really good movie. You want to know where it's going to end. You want to know what's going to happen to the character.
And each song is not a new scene, but a new section of the movie telling the same story, which is actually really interesting because one thing, I think we'll probably get down to this with the Brown album because it's kind of more applicable there, but they were...
Which is the second album, isn't it?
The second album. They were the embodiment...
Called The Band.
Yeah. They were the living embodiment of working class Americans. Or not, obviously they were Canadian, but the music they were playing is what mattered. I'm just getting up the album on Spotify just to put a few songs on the playlist. We've already said Tears of Rage, The Weight, Wheels on Fire, and I Shall Be Released. I want to just add in Long Black Veil because it's a cover, it's an old country standard. Johnny Cash has covered it, and they do a lovely, lovely version of it with some fantastic harmonies on there. Richard Manuel's vocals on Lonesome Susie, could bring you to tears. And my final favourite one is We Can Talk, which, performed by a different band, recorded with different instruments in a different studio, could be a pop hit. It's a fantastic song. So those are all going to be in the playlist. That's our sort of take. We'll wrap up on music from Big Pink. We'll finish it with just a few quotes or what people had to say and do about it. Eric Clapton quit Cream because of this album. Did you know that?
I didn't know that. I knew he wanted to bring the band, but was it that
he loved the album's roots rock style. So this Americana, this country feel, that he wanted to pursue it more, and he wanted to play music more of that style. Because Cream, as you guys know from episode 17, were blues rock with hints of jazz. Clapton was starting to take in this Americana and this country stuff that was going on, across the pond. And so he heard Big Pink and quit Cream. So that's Clapton's reason. George Harrison said he was so impressed by the musicianship and the camaraderie. That's why I had to Google the definition of it. And this is a quote directly from Roger Waters. Music from Big Pink is the second most influential album record in the history of rock and roll after Sgt. Pepper. It affected Pink Floyd deeply, deeply, deeply. That's 3 deeply.
Well, you can hear Pink Floyd's attempt to groove. They found their own way of doing it. It's not like the band.
But I think that's a very good point. Yeah, because obviously before '68, Pink Floyd was very, should we say, progressive, experimental, avant-garde.
Very loose.
Very loose.
Way. They were looking for a groove.
Can you imagine?
Time.
Yeah.
Right?
So you kind of just imagine that Roger Waters has gone away and listened to Big Pink and thought, let's apply some of that groove, some of that raw heart and emotion into our music.
Yeah.
It's great, isn't it?
There you go.
Excellent.
They influence everyone.
Now, this will also sort of apply to the second album, as I've said before, but what we need to talk about is what the band, and in particular these 2 albums, have done for music, because it's very, very important. Essentially, the band have created a new genre, or did create a new genre, and we can label that, it's got 2 labels. You could call it roots rock, or you could call it Americana. Now here's what I've done as a definition of Americana.
It's huge. The creators of Americana.
It's huge. Right? Here's what I've sort of cross-referenced a few articles, and this is what generally the consensus of what Americana music is. Folk, gospel, blues, jazz, R&B, rock and roll, and bluegrass, all put together. Obviously, not every song is going to have elements of all of those, but in an album like Big Pink, you can hear every one of those genres somewhere mixed with another one.
Musical freedom again, isn't it?
Rock and roll is musical freedom. And there is, talking about that, there's a fantastic Levon Helm quote. We'll put the YouTube link in the show notes so you guys can watch it, because it's just so fantastic watching him speak. I will do my best to replicate the quote. I should say it now. Yeah. The Last Waltz is a movie they filmed of a concert, and it was directed by the famous Martin Scorsese. Now this is when Scorsese was very young, so this was one of his first projects. Scorsese's interviewing him about their music, Levon Helm, and Levon Helm says, I'm going to try and do a South American accent. He goes, what you going to do, you got to take, you got bits of gospel, and again I'm just making up where gospels come from for the sake of the quote. You got your gospel down from Texas way, you got your R&B down from Mississippi, your folk and your blues come from down Tennessee, and you mix it all together and it just grooves. And Scorsese says, and what do you call it? Levon Helm looks at the camera, smiles and says, rock and roll.
Yeah, because that's what it is, isn't it? Because
isn't that true though?
Claim, oh, they're not a rock band, right?
No, yeah.
That's one interesting thing about doing the podcast, like, because we're bringing things into the big umbrella of rock and roll.
Yeah.
So this is rock and roll because you've got the attitude, the musicality, or whatever you want to. It's really hard to define exactly what it is. But some people would say they're a folk band.
Yeah.
No, but they're not entirely folk.
No.
They've changed folk music. They're not entirely Americana or whatever that is, because they were kind of creating it.
Yeah.
But if you just label them as a rock and roll band, it just fits.
It encompasses a lot, doesn't it?
Yeah, and it gives you the freedom to do whatever you want to do if you call yourself a rock band. You know?
Exactly. So just we thought we'd mention that because the next album. So we'll go on. 1969, they went on tour and they did their first ever show at the Winterland Ballroom. They performed at Woodstock that summer, and they went to the Isle of Wight Festival with Bob Dylan at the end of '69. Then came the Brown album, which is probably their most famous album. September 22nd, 1969, and I've done a lot of listening to this album, as have you. And one of the things I didn't know, the critics were generally talking about it, was that it's actually considered a concept album, focusing on people, places, and traditions of America.
Oh, there you go, talking about the fact that they take you to places.
Exactly, yeah. But it is, the album was preserved into the National, the National Recording Registry, because, and this is a quote from them, it was culturally, historically, or aesthetically important and or informs or reflects life in the United States. For example, The Night They Drove Old Dixie Down is about the Civil War, and King Harvest is about the unionization of farm workers. So, like I said a few minutes ago, they're the living embodiment of the working class people of America at that time.
And they're talking about, like real life situations.
Yeah, culturally historic and important events.
And common people could relate to what they're talking about. Yeah. It's not like we're talking about being muses. That's an interesting thing. They were muses.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, especially.
Which is people who can play clever stuff musically, people who have a deep knowledge of music in general and different genres, and they had the techniques, they had the information, they had everything to be intellectual musicians, and maybe they could be playing really complicated stuff for a small niche.
That's a really good point. But
they were like, no, I want to talk to the common man. Yeah,
that's a fantastic point. Just something you reminded me of that. Garth Hudson, the organ player, accordionist, he's about 10 years older than the rest of them. And it's just a fun little story I remember reading. When he was asked to join the band, he said, that's fine, I'll join, but I need $10 from each of you every month. And they said, what do you mean, why? He said, well, my parents sent me to music school and they think I'm a jazz teacher. so if you guys pay me, it looks like I'm a teacher, and I'm going to give you lessons. And he did. He taught them jazz, and he got paid to teach the rest of the band jazz.
So you have a teacher.
Yeah, I just like it. I just like that he was like, I can't tell my parents I'm in a rock and roll band.
And he was the oldest guy.
Yeah, and he was the oldest guy. I've got to pretend I'm a jazz teacher, so just give me some money so I can pay my rent to my parents, you know, whatever.
It's probably the first ever jazz touring teacher.
Yeah, exactly.
But here's the interesting thing about them, because they had, that's one of the things I like the most, they had piano and organ. Instead of having one guy, like, going from one thing to another, one guy as the main keyboard player in the band, and he does, you know, lots of, you know, he does all the keyboard related stuff. You have one guy who's a specialist in piano playing, and the other guy is an organ player. And
that comes through.
It just blends together so well.
A song on Music from Big Pink called Chest Fever is essentially, there's a keyboard solo at the start by Garth Hudson. And another fantastic example of what you've said, and the distinction between an organ / keyboard and a piano, is the album is called Before the Flood, and it's Bob Dylan and the band, and it's a live album. And they do It Ain't Me Babe, which is a folk country standard, but Bob Dylan's famous for doing it. And there's a fantastic, during the second verse, when Bob Dylan's singing the second verse, Garth is just doing some lovely little melodies on the organ, whilst Richard is hammering away at the piano. And they're the same instrument at heart. They're the same instrument, but they're both doing different jobs, just like you said. And for me, it's
the way you approach it. Yeah, for me, it's like if you play acoustic guitar, and that's your main instrument, and then you pick the electric guitar, you're going to phrase in a different way. It's not exactly the same instrument. The notes are the same, you know, the strings are technically the same, but it is a completely different instrument in many ways. So I think organ and keyboards, it does have the same contrast. And to have one guy for piano and one guy for organ, it's like, you know, it's like the electric and the acoustic, with a specialist for each of them. So
that's a good point. Just finishing up on the Brown album, just so you guys know how important and how highly rated it is, Rolling Stone, the 500 greatest albums of all time article, put this album at number 45. Robert Christgau, the music journalist and reviewer, he rated this album better than Abbey Road, which came out 4 days later. He had to justify why Abbey Road was his second best album of '69. And he said, well, the band released the Brown album. So that's what Chris Gow thinks of it. I would genuinely love to put every song from this album into the playlist, because it is a 10 out of 10 album. I'll put my favourites. Sorry?
Put the album on the playlist, can you do it?
There you go. That's it. He told me to, so I'll do it. But just so you guys know what my favourites are: Cross the Great Divide, Rocking Chair. You know that one, don't you? It's just, I think Levon Helm's on mandolin for that one, and they're not all on their normal instruments. You get the impression of three guys standing around the mandolin singing together, and they're talking about going back home to sitting on the rocking chair on their front porch, meeting their friends, and I get goosebumps talking about it, because you can genuinely tell all three of those guys are singing from the heart, and the harmonies in that song are just fantastic. And I think each of them sing a verse. But you almost can't tell, despite the fact that Levon Helm, Rick Danko and Richard Manuel have three different voices. During that song they come together as one, and the harmonies are just so emotional. Like I just said, I get goosebumps, because it's just one of those songs that pulls on your... I want to know what it's like to be a retired American sitting on my porch, singing on the rocking chair, looking at my family, chewing my tobacco, sipping my moonshine.
That's it. But even though if you're not from that specific culture, you can relate to that. And you can think about the future.
What it means to you, exactly.
One day you're going to retire, look at your family and think, oh, I've done this, and it's really cool.
Excellent. Well, what we're not going to do is spend much time on more albums after this, because those two are what introduced the band to the world of music. After that, their fame went to another level. Check this out. They were 1970. They were featured on the cover of Time magazine. They were the first rock band after the Beatles to do that.
That's big.
That's huge, man.
And they were huge. Strong, like personalities, and people knew their faces, right?
Yeah.
Because I tend to think of the band as something that musicians like, and the general public knows the songs, but they don't know their faces.
Yeah.
But it wasn't true at the time.
No.
They were famous faces. Everyone knew them.
But they had they had a bit of a fall from grace, really, but we'll get to that later on. So 1970, they released the album Stage Fright, which the critical reaction was good, and it is a good album. There's a few good songs on there, but compared to the previous two, nothing stands up, and that's not the band's fault, is it? Because the first two albums were just so good that the third one just didn't match up, really. I'll put some songs in the playlist. The Shape I'm In's lovely. W.S. Walcott Medicine Show. Daniel and the Sacred Harp. Yeah, that's it for that album. I mean, I think anything by the band is worth listening to, because throughout the whole time that those five guys were together, you are seriously getting that camaraderie and that sense of a brotherhood within a musical group.
Yeah, and it's not an easy thing to achieve.
Yeah. Later on in 1970, so only 2 years after they'd been together, Robbie Robertson started exerting much greater control over the band in terms of taking over decisions, the songwriting, and it really affected the relationship between him and Levon Helm. Considering Levon Helm essentially put the band together.
Leader.
Exactly, yeah. But I don't want to. So this is stuff that none of us, not even the people who are experts on the band, know about. It's only these five guys that know. The talk is that Levon Helm and the rest of the band, except Robbie, really got into taking a lot of LSD and drinking a lot of alcohol and taking a lot of drugs. So Robbie Robertson said that he felt he had to take over because things, I don't want to say standards were slipping, but
they would lose control.
Yeah, things like that, you know. So 1971, you have the Cahoots album, and most importantly, Rock of Ages, which is a live double album, which I've got on vinyl, which is just fantastic. They've established their sound, but they didn't stop there. For the Rock of Ages album, they introduced a horn section, and all of these songs that are in the playlist, they played live with a horn section.
So they're still innovating, isn't it? That's the
still innovating, still trying to find different ways to put their message through to an audience that has already seen and heard them. Bob Dylan also joined them for 4 songs on that one, so isn't that great? You can just say, come on Bob, let's do a few together.
That's cool.
So between 1973 and 1975, they released an album full of covers called Moondog Matinee. They do a fantastic instrumental cover of the theme from The Third Man. So do you know that movie? The soundtrack by Anton Karas. I will put that in the playlist. They then backed Bob Dylan again. They played on his album Planet Waves, becoming the backing band really. That was 1974. Then they did the album Before the Flood, which was a Bob Dylan live album, which the band backed and played as his backing band. Then the album Northern Lights, Southern Cross, which all songs were written by Robertson. That's the first album where they were all done by him.
Like totally in control.
And it showed, because poor record sales, well actually it was favoured by the critics, but in terms of the band's fans, which matter most, they didn't like it. They wanted all of them to have been working together, I think. And from that really, I mean, from there unfortunately the band goes downhill, because Robbie Robertson got tired of touring and wanted to end things. So he worked with Martin Scorsese to put this project together called The Last Waltz, which was their last waltz. It was their last time playing together, all 5 of them, on a stage, and they were joined by a plethora of guests. We watched it. Do you remember when we were recording Jack's latest albums? We went to stay in Devon.
They had Muddy Waters.
That's right. Yeah.
Neil Young, Eric Clapton.
Yeah. Joni Mitchell, Ringo Starr, Ronnie Wood, Neil Diamond, Van Morrison, and Ronnie Hawkins came back as well.
Oh, yeah. Imagine having all those guys wanting to be a part of your last gig. Like,
incredible, isn't it?
Imagine them finding time on their calendars, like cancelling gigs or whatever, to be there with the band.
But that just shows these guys wanted to play with them. Clapton's wish came true.
Yeah,
he got to play with the band. Yeah,
there you go. So think about it. Think about that show for me is, although it wasn't actually their last show.
They got together for another one for Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
Even though that show in itself, if you have time to just watch one concert by the band, that's the one.
Yeah.
Because you can see how much influence they had over everyone.
Yeah.
You see all those guys there paying a tribute to them and performing with them. fantastic gig. Maybe they were not even playing at their best, but does it
We'll
matter?
put the songs from the last Waltz on the playlist as well, because it's just worth hearing. And then all together at the end, all of those guests I mentioned, plus the band, plus Bob Dylan, come and do I Shall Be Released. And everyone is fucked on cocaine and drunk and high, so it doesn't. The vocals don't sound good, but what matters is all these people have come together to celebrate the music of the band,
And that's rock.
and that's rock and roll. I honestly think that's a good place to leave it, because there is more history to the band. I
think
that's where the band peaked, and that's where unfortunately the band as those five guys ended.
I really wish this episode can get to people who never heard of the band.
Yeah, if anything, we just hope that we're telling you a bit about the new band.
Because I'm so lucky. I've been told by you to listen to the band.
Yeah, but I wouldn't know about them without my brother. So it's like, it's just pass on.
So
I mean,
that's proper word of mouth.
Well, my brother, he's got very good music taste. There's a lot of stuff he likes that I wouldn't listen to, but there's a lot of stuff he likes that I do listen to. So what I'm saying is he's well versed in music. We're musicians. We've trained. We've learned. We've played hundreds of songs by hundreds of artists, and yet us two didn't know about the band.
Yeah.
And I think Tarek only found out about the band through a friend of his. So they really are this kind of cult band.
It's
where
word
it's
of
word
mouth.
of mouth. Yeah, exactly.
And still, they're big, and that actually shows why they were usually praised by the critics first, and the press, and then yours, because people who actually knew a lot about music and did their research, like the band is great, and then they would have to tell people, listen to those guys, they're great. That's why some of the albums, I think, even, I might be wrong on this, but I think music from Big Pink took a while to start selling really well.
I think so.
Yeah, because the critics started talking about it, and then people started talking, and then word of mouth or whatever, and then people got into it. But it is what it is. It's like a really good movie that is not a blockbuster, but you heard of it and you want to check it out.
Exactly. So we will end it there. We'll finish up there. I will just summarise a few other little moments in the band's career from that point. They toured without Robbie Robertson from '83 because he'd gone on to do some solo stuff. He was a producer in New York, actually. Because of that, and because of the non-success of their albums after Stage Fright, they were going from playing arenas and just to small theatres, really. So it's a shame, they were looked up to by bands like Grateful Dead, and then in the 80s they were supporting Grateful Dead. So it's a bit of a shame that we have to sort of tell you this, because we'd love to tell you that they just toured arenas for the rest of their lives, but
it doesn't quite happen.
It happens, isn't it? This is real life. Yeah, this is real life. In 1986, very tragically, Richard Manuel hanged himself after a show, aged 42, because he had serious problems with alcohol and drug addiction. They were doing 2 nights in a Florida hotel, I believe, and he killed himself, unfortunately. That really did mark the beginning of the end, because then after that, certain band members, I think maybe Rick Danko left, and then they had to hire in other guys, and from then on the band really just wasn't the band. They were inducted into the Canadian Music Hall of Fame in '89. In '78, they all came together to play at Rick Danko's solo gig as an encore. Garth Hudson, Robbie Robertson and Rick Danko got together for the band's induction into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, but Levon Helm wasn't there. A quick note on Helm and Robertson: there is fallout between them because, from what we know, Robertson bought the rights to all of their music, to all of their credits, because they weren't touring, or they were touring but the money wasn't good, so they were happy to sell their rights. Robertson bought them all, and that meant he could do whatever he wanted with the songs, and so he became more than a leader, the dictator of what would happen with their music. And Levon Helm said the selling of the songs wasn't done fairly, and for years until his death there was this back and forth between Robertson and Helm. December 10th, 1999, Rick Danko dies in his sleep, aged 56. 2012, April 17, Levon Helm dies. So we just left with Garth Hudson and Robbie Robertson now. So it is a real shame to hear about things like The Argument, Richard Manuel killing himself. Rick Danko got really fat, and I think he had a heart attack. I think he ate himself to death. So it's a shame to sort of end this episode where we've been so happy about the music that they've produced and the feelings. I go back to the Car Journey, 4 AM, UFC. that was such a special
but
moment for me.
the music outlives the artist.
It does.
And
But we're just here trying to present to you guys the history and what you need to know about a band.
A band.
Say it.
The band.
Which band?
Which band?
The band. So you know that's why I felt it was important to mention those things.
Don't we have a segment?
Do we have a segment?
Yes.
I went past it.
Oh.
We do.
Oh, we have a segment.
We are. So we're going to finish.
Guys.
That's right. We're going to finish the episode off with one of our segments, and the segment is how rock and roll is that. So as you know, we are rating statements and acts done in the name of music from 0 to 100. We've already done a Highway Star. We did another one on the Cream episode, I think, about jamming at loud volumes, isn't it? So Felipe, on a scale from 0 to 100, I want to know how rock and roll you think it is to name yourself the band.
It's definitely very rock and roll, isn't it?
It's like directing a film and calling it the movie. It's like opening a restaurant and calling it the food.
Oh yeah, I do have to say, like, it does cause some confusion, right? So that's why I think, like,
that's true, because you Google the band and they won't be the first thing that comes up.
Of course, they wouldn't be. Yeah, so they would not predict in Google.
I forgot that.
They were not worried about that. Oh, how about Google search in the future? But I do like to say the negative side of it for me is like the band. It's almost generic, but it's not a band. It's the band, which is very pretentious. Because it's pretentious, I would give it a 68 out of 100.
Fantastic. 68 out of 100 on how rock and roll is. 68 out of 100, calling yourselves the band. One thing, we really will end on this. There is a tribute band to the band in America who have called themselves, ready for this? The Band Band.
The band.
So it's meant to say, we are the band. But on the posters, it's just the band.
That's just
amazing.
That's
rock and roll.
Yeah, that's rock and roll.
To sum it up, the band created a new genre, that they were responsible for the innovation and the creation of Americana, and they did that by taking all of their influences, rockabilly, rock and roll, R&B, gospel, jazz from their teacher Garth Hudson, a blues, and mixing it all together.
They played a big role in electrifying folk music and changing the history of the genre, and they were as good as Bob Dylan's back band or anyone's back band as they were as songwriters.
That's a fantastic point to end on. They didn't. Their quality wasn't diminished when they went and did their own stuff. It was actually enhanced, wasn't it?
Yes.
Or as good as.
Not many musicians can do that, to be good backing musicians for an artist and being the artist.
That's a good point. Anyway, guys, thank you very much for tuning into another episode of the Long Live Rock and Roll podcast. We hope you've enjoyed this. As usual, the playlist will be at the bottom of the show notes, and I'll put the link to that rock and roll Levon Helm quote because I really didn't do it justice. So go and check it out. I'm shortening our where to find us because this guy's told me to say one thing. You can find us on the internet.
Find us on the internet.
So that's all. You know what to do. But anyway, guys, thank you very much for joining us, and tune in again next time, please.
And keep on rocking.
And as usual, long live rock and roll.